They entered to the castle a couple of hours later. The sunny day faded away, and a summer storm was approaching. Jon ran to find his mother and uncle to show them his new pet, and the Stark boys went to meet their sisters and little brother, Ned Stark. Catelyn was waiting for him in the God's Wood. He saw her face filled with pain, his heart clenched with the look in her eyes. "Ned, I'm so sorry, my love. Jon Arryn is dead." Ned felt a lump in his throat. Jon Arryn was like a father for him, and there's more, Robb. King Robert is on his way with his family and royal servants. Suddenly all the grief for Jon Arryn vanished from his heart, as a feeling of fear started to grow. He knew the reason of Robert's journey, but the presence of Arthur Dayne and his nephew, Jon, was a risk now. "I guess that it is time to say the truth," he thought. "Jory, call for Jon, Lady Willa and Sir Arthur, please," he ordered. Catelyn was giving him a suspicious look. "Ned, why did you call for them?" she asked him. "I guess it's time to tell the truth, Cat. Jon Snow." His uncle was teaching him how to fight with two swords. It was hard and didn't really work in closed places. It was a technique for open spaces, when a knight is surrounded by his enemies. "Sir Arthur, Lord Stark wants to talk with you and your sister. He's in the God's Wood with Lady Stark. He wants you to be there too, Jon," Jory told them. Sir Arthur gave a small nod and called for his sister. Jon took the swords and put them back in the army. When he went out of the army, he found his family waiting for him. Robb followed him with his pup. They walked into the God's Wood to meet Lord Stark. He was sitting on a stone with Lady Stark by his side. "Come here, Jon, we need to talk about your parents," Lord Stark said with a cold tone. Jon looked at his mother and then returned to look at Lord Stark. "What do you need to talk about them, uncle?" he replied, naive. "Well, King Robert is on his way to Winterfell, so you need to know the truth about them, my boy," he told him, sadness taking place on his face. "The truth? I already know that I'm your late brother's bastard. He was Brandon Stark, and my mother is Willa Went," he answered, feeling uncomfortable with Lord Stark's words. Then he felt his mother's hand on his shoulder, her lilac eyes piercing his own. After that he felt his uncle Arthur's hand over his other shoulder. "We are not from the Riverlands, my love. My name is Ashara, and your uncle is Arthur. We came from Dorne, from House Dane," his mother said. He understood immediately the reason of their lie. They were enemies of the crown by the time he was born. But it wasn't all. His mother took him by his hands. "My boy, I cared for you since you were a little baby back there in Dorne. I raised you to be an honorable man like your uncle." Tears started to fall from her eyes. "But you need to know that you are not my trueborn son." Jon felt as if someone had thrown a bucket of ice water over him. He tried to speak, but he couldn't. "I know you will hate us for this, but it was the only way to protect you," Sir Arthur said. Jon looked at Robb and Lady Stark. They were as stunned as himself. They didn't know, he thought. "So, is my mother alive? I know my father was murdered by the Mad King, but what about my real mother?" he said. Sir Arthur looked directly at him. "Your mother was Lady Lyanna Stark," Lord Stark said, amazing him and his family at the same time. "But your father was not killed by the Mad King. He was killed by King Robert at the Trident." The revelation of his father-murderer hit him like a hammer, ironically. "Your father was the Crown Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, my best friend, such as your mother was until they both died," Sir Arthur said with a cracking voice. Jon never thought that he would see his uncle cry in front of him. "Then I'm not a Snow, I'm a Blackfyre." His world was crumbling with all those revelations. He understood that he was the last living Targaryen in Westeros. He understood how the world worked. He was a threat for Robert's reign even if he was a Blackfyre. But the words that came from Sir Arthur's mouth put his world upside down. you're not a bastard boy, you're my king, my true king. I was a king's guard when the war ended, it is a vow for life. So I protected you all these years because you deserved to live, I saw you grew up between these walls with Rob, and every time I see you, I see your parents, and that brings me the biggest of all the satisfactions. Arthur told him with tears in his eyes. What Arthur says is true, you're the heir to the Iron Throne. Lyanna married Rhaegar before the war ended. But know this, Jon, it's now your decision what you'll do with this information. We will support you no matter what. Lord Stark was staring at him with a fatherly smile on his face. Jon, we're still cousins, almost brothers, you're just an important guy now, nothing more. Rob joked with him, he was as shocked as Jon with these revelations. Jon's head was full of uncertainty, he wasn't a bastard anymore, he was the rightful heir to the Seven Kingdoms. His family was long gone, nobody heard about the Targaryens since the rebellion ended. He felt loneliness in a certain way, they lied to me, but they never treated me like a bastard. It made sense in his head, he knew what his destiny was, but he didn't want it. Whichever your choice would be, you need to leave Winterfell before the king arrives with his subjects. Sir Barristan Selmy, or the Kingslayer, could recognize Sir Arthur. It would raise suspicions in the king's head. You know that he has a master of whispers. That eunuch isn't trustworthy. Lady Ashara told him. I will stay here, son, they about my dead-born child, I'll be safe, but you'll never be safe if the king and his people are under these roofs. She added. But I don't want to be a king. I grew up with all of you. I learned to walk within these walls. I learned to fight too. I grew up knowing that I wasn't worthy of anything the gods could give me. And it was just a lie. And now that I want to become a knight, you tell me the truth. Jon felt the rage increasing in him. He knew in that moment that all the things his family said were true. He was a real Targaryen, but he was a Stark too. He felt the perfect balance between ice and fire inside him. He remembered that dream about dragons he had a long time ago. He felt that he needed to make a hard decision, but he didn't have to make it yet. His thoughts immediately got supported by Sir Arthur's words. You don't want to be a king. Then you don't need to be a king. We leave tomorrow at first light, boy. I'm a knight and I need a squire. It seems like we will make your dream come true after all. Jon was speechless after hearing that. He was the only knight he knew personally. Sir Gayrold and Sir Oswell left Winterfell a couple of years after their arrival, but Sir Arthur stayed there, with him, teaching him how to be a good man. It was the hour of the wolf when he heard someone knocking on his door. He opened just to see his mother standing there, her face was full of sadness. M.O.T. Lady Ashara, what are you doing here this late? He asked in a polite manner. Cut that shit, Jon, I fed you. I gave you clothes and love since you were just a little baby in Dawn. I cared for you, as if you were that child that I lost many years ago. Maybe we don't have the same blood, but I will be your mother till the end of my days. Ashara said. Jon felt the necessity to laugh as loud as he could. He never heard his supposed mother swear in front of him. He couldn't blame her. She raised him despite his origins. Despite he was the result of one of the biggest mistakes ever made in the story of Westeros. I'm sorry, Mother. Jon felt shame after denying her sacrifice in that way. Don't be sorry for such a silly thing. You must be sorry for leaving me here. I have your cousins and uncles to entertain me, but they would never replace my son or my brother. She said while her voices started to crack, and tears started to run over her cheeks. We must forge our destiny, my son. Don't let them tell you what you can or can't be. You always wanted to be Aemon the Dragon Knight. And I have to tell you, you can be Aemon the Dragon Knight reborn. Jon felt proud of having a mother like Ashara. You even have the proper name to make it come true. Jon gave Ashara a confused look. Your real name, your Targaryen name, is Aemon Targaryen. She said. Suddenly, Jon felt the need of scream. He found his true origins and his true name on the same day, but he remembered that he was the stain in Westeros story. But he vanished those thoughts from his head. He had the proper name and the proper master. The opportunity of become a knight was in his hands. I will miss you every day, Mother, I promise you that I will return to you when this is over. Jon hugged Ashara with all his strength. It was the hardest of all goodbyes. I know that you'll come back, my little knight. Just take care of Arthur for me, would you? She replied. About dragons that night. I promise, he said. The same dragon that appeared in his dreams when he was a little boy. It looked at him with his red eyes while its white scales moved quietly with his respiration. Jon felt the fire started to burn inside him. It was an omen. Maybe he was this white dragon. Maybe he was destined to mount that dragon. But dragons were extinct just like the Targaryen house was, until that day. He woke up early the next morning. Arthur was saddling the horses while he carried their bags. Then they broke their fast. He helped Sir Arthur to put his armor on. It was a cold morning, but Arya was there to say goodbye to her favorite persons in the castle. Jon almost lost his balance when she hung on his neck. Come here, you little wolf. He squeezed her with his arms and put her on the ground. I got something for you. It's thin and small, just like you. Jon gave her a box, and a small grin took form on his face when he saw Arya's reaction. She always wanted a sword and now she had one. She was astonished with the Bravosa sword. You know that all the good swords have names. She gave him a knowing look. Sansa and Septa Mordane can keep their stitching needles. I have my own, she said. Jon hugged her one last time before leaving, then he looked at Robb. Robb, remember, if you need us, you just need to call for us. He was his brother born from other parents. I'll write you from all the cities that we will know, he promised. I'm sure you will, just stay far from south. You know that we Stark men don't do well in the south, Robb told him. Let's go, Jon. It is a long ride to the wall. Sir Arthur interrupted their talk. Why in seven hells do you want to go to the wall? Jon asked him with a look of disbelief. We need to talk with your last living relative here in Westeros, and remember, you're my squire, boy. You don't have to make questions. The knight scolded him with a severe look. Of course, my lord. Jon gave him a small nod. He tried to dissimulate the smile on his face. He was on his way to meet his great-great-uncle Aemon, the master of Castle Black, a sworn brother of the Night's Watch. Jon and Arthur rode towards Castle Black. He turned one last time, and saw Winterfell in the horizon. A lonely tear made its way down his face. Then he turned around to ride beside Sir Arthur, a knight of the Seven Kingdoms and his squire of the Seven Kingdoms. They were like dunk and egg in every single way. The mere thought made Jon laugh. He was writing his destiny knowing that he was someone in the world after all.